All right. Well, I'm excited for our conversation today. We've been talking about some really exciting leadership principles. We've talked about leadership styles, and then most recently, we've been talking about emotional intelligence. So today, I want to explore the different leadership styles and their correlation with emotional intelligence. So before I do that, let's just take a really quick reminder of an overview of those different leadership styles. We have autocratic, and they're the ones who make all the decisions. We have democratic, they lead by consensus. Transformational, they emphasize personal development. Transactional equates a job well done with completing all the tasks. A servant leader focuses on empowering others. Charismatic leadership leads by inspiration. Laissez-faire, I know I totally did not even say that right. Like I hear it right in my head, can't make it come out right in my mind. They lead in the background. Situational leaders, there's not a set style that's really defined. What it is it just depends on what's happening. And depending on what happens, that is how they're going to lead. And then adaptive, and they are leaders who lead well through change. So which do you think of those styles, do you think has the highest emotional intelligence, and which do you think has the lowest?
I would say maybe the servant leader might be on the higher end, and transactional might be the lowest.
Okay. Yeah, there's no wrong or right answer. This is truly
What were
like,
the
what do you think? What's
what were the
your
ones
opinion?
after laissez-faire?
Was situational,
Thank you.
situational and adaptive.
I have some stuff going on in the background, so that's why I shut my door and I'm putting myself on mute when I'm not talking. But I was thinking, I agree actually with Erin, and I was, as you were talking, the servant leader, empowering, that's the one that's empowering others to improve. That's the one that I was thinking of also that has a lot of emotional stuff going on. And then transactional sounds good.
Yeah. Okay. So just for the moment, let's go back again. We did talk about this last week, but defining what emotional intelligence is. Emotional intelligence refers to the ability to recognize, understand, manage, and effectively use one's own emotions and the emotions of others in various interpersonal situations. Some of the components we talked about last week are the self-awareness, self-regulation, motivation, empathy, and social skills. So when we look at these two, let's talk about what the role of emotional intelligence has in effective leadership. First of all, I mean, obviously, no surprise here, understanding and managing emotions. Understanding my emotions, understanding the emotions of the people around me, that is a critical component of leadership. Leadership is no longer simply handing out tasks, watching to make sure that things get done. We are evolving as leaders. There's a big champion for evolving as leaders, in that leadership is about people and leading people, which means that we're looking at our emotions, we're looking at our feelings, we're looking at how it impacts our workplace and how it impacts us and how it impacts others. Another big piece of that is empathy and team collaboration. If we can't put ourselves into other people's shoes, then we can get very stuck as leaders. We're not able to understand maybe what their challenges are, and that makes it difficult to lead. If you can't understand what somebody's going through, have you ever had that where you're like, I just don't understand what the problem is. I don't get what you don't get. Empathy allows you as a leader to be able to put yourself into that other person's shoes, see things from their perspective, and it changes, and it allows you to be able to say, oh, I get it, and be able to then lead more effectively through it, whatever the challenge may be. Of course, another thing as far as the role of emotional intelligence is effective communication. Anybody who knows me knows that I will sing it from the rooftops forever, that communication is really the foundation of any sort of healthy team. If you want to get anything done, there's got to be effective communication. And of course, that comes from knowing ourselves. It comes from knowing the people around us, and breaking down those barriers, which then comes into utilizing adaptability and flexibility. That's a huge piece of emotional intelligence that sets leaders up for success. We can't, as leaders, come in and be like, autocratic leaders do it, right? Frequently. They'll come in and say, this is how we're doing it. This is the way it is. There's no other way. But I think that a self-aware autocratic leader can still be the one who makes all the decisions and yet allow for some adaptability and flexibility. They might be the one making all the decisions as an autocratic leader, but they can be flexible enough because they've listened to the people around them, or they've sat back and put themselves into the shoes of the people around them that they're leading. Of course, emotional intelligence also is very effective in motivating and inspiring others. It's a huge piece of conflict resolution. If we're not emotionally intelligent, conflicts don't really get resolved. Typically, what I've seen in companies is they get kind of shoved under the carpet, and we don't talk about that. I remember being at a company one time, and I'd asked a question, and somebody was like, "Oh, yeah, we don't talk about that." And what that tells me is that the leader who was overseeing the team at the time, they didn't know how to deal with the conflict. It was something that was a challenge for them. And so rather than dealing with it, they just swept it under the rug. They didn't want to deal with it. Nobody talked about it. And it was the big elephant in the room that everybody pretended wasn't there. So what are your thoughts on how self-awareness influences leadership decisions and interactions? What have you seen? How have you seen that work effectively?
Well, I'll go first. Awareness is always the key to good decision making, whether it has to do with people or the results in their intertwined. We do not see naturally the impact we're having on other people. And so becoming aware of it gives you the freedom to choose a different approach. Because we go on autopilot from our wiring. And so, yeah, awareness. And the same thing with emotional intelligence. Sometimes we deny we're experiencing an emotion, and we think that's a way of spiritualizing it, but it's the opposite. It becomes a sniper then. So I'm a person who doesn't choose to do jealousy, but somebody gets a contract and I don't, and I experience jealousy. If I pretend, that's why positive psychology works and positive thinking doesn't. If I just smile and say, "Oh, great, congratulations, you got the gig." Well, that's how I want to be, but internally I might be totally different. So it's about awareness, and then it's about the power to choose new responses. But your automatic response is what it is, regardless of how spiritual you think you are. And so I don't say I'm angry. I say, oh, there's anger. And then you can decide what to do with it, because that's not who I am, but that's what's beating in my chest. So awareness is key.
That's really good.
I think that's all. I just want to make a couple comments before there's a bunch of noise happening soon. That was a really good comment, Tom. And I've just noticed in myself the last few years, 2020 was really hard on me. I had a tough time during that time for many reasons. There's a lot of different things happening. But I also found that I was so quick to be upset and not and with a work thing or with whatever it is, and not sitting and thinking about it before I respond, because I wasn't being self-aware, actually, is what I'm saying. And
Yeah.
so my self-awareness wasn't immediate, it was later. And I think it's something that people have to practice all the time.
Yeah.
It's so powerful, Kathy, because the first step in grieving is to sit with it. Every culture has a grieving process built in, but we don't on our personal losses, which might be the loss of a good mood. It's not always the big things like a loved one.
Yeah.
It is to sit with it and let it be, and then choose the response. And that takes, what you just said was so profound, is that takes practice. Because we already know how to react. We've been doing reaction push-ups for however many years we've been living, since we're a little child. We don't have to train, you don't have to plant the weeds, they just show up. But
Yeah.
so sitting with it and practicing, that's so powerful. Good work.
Yeah, I completely agree. I had a similar experience, Kathy, as well. And I feel like I'm still practicing my way out of it, and taking a step to breathe, in those moments where you feel the strong reaction come on, just take a deep breath has been helping me. And yeah, take that moment to sit with it. So it's always a good reminder too when you hear that, because it's easy to forget and easy to react, like you said, Thomas, built into our beings.
And then when you do react, just notice it. Don't let the inner judge say, "Oh, there you go again, Aaron," and beating you up. And just say, "Oh, okay, there goes reaction again. How can I
Yeah.
make a new choice?"
Yeah.
Yeah, it's such a great point.
Yeah. I've actually been doing some studying on the fight or flight response. And I feel like since 2020, it seems that we've all been in this constant state of fight or flight. And we are now trying to figure out how to deactivate that. And so, like you were suggesting, just sitting and breathing through and being aware of what's going on and what you're feeling, and then determining, what am I going to do next from this? Yeah, that's really good.
That's very
Jill,
good.
do you mind if I add one thing, Jill?
Nope.
Thanks. I find that there's some crossover to so I'm in sales as well, Kathy. So I feel like I've always excelled at like continuing the conversation and like taking every moment to sell. And the more I sit back and take a moment to like focus on my active listening as a salesperson, it can help a ton, because I know something I've heard recently, like people say pitch slap as a as a euphemism for, when you're just like pitching someone over and over again. And I think this conversation, emotional intelligence, just expands into like even those moments when it's not about like the negative or anger response or just like our personal emotions. It's how do we, I think, be more active listeners even in our like sales focus as well.
And
So
Aaron, both parties shoot themselves in the foot, because a lot of times the people get to the bottom line. They
Yeah.
want you to be fast. They don't want to build relationship. They don't want rapport. Bottom line it. And so you're doing what they're asking, and then they don't feel listened to. But if you start to ask questions, they're like, "I only got 10 minutes. Come on, give me the bottom line. Oh, that costs too much." We don't even know what the value proposition is. And
Yeah.
today our culture is so ADHD as a whole culture,
Yeah.
that we're desiring someone like Aaron who really will take the time to do active listening, but we're not participating in it. So
Yeah.
how's he supposed to do it? It takes two actors to do it. And that's the reality. And people think it's okay not to respond, and it's just built into the culture. And then they feel like they're pestering you. When in less than 10 seconds, I could write, Aaron, I can't even give this mental bandwidth right now. Can we have a conversation in 2 weeks? And then he nods his head yes, instead of me just ignoring him. And then he has 2 follow-up emails because he promised he'd follow up. And so both are dancing their way the opposite direction of open listening and active listening.
That's a good point. Yeah, the emotional intelligence as the receiver of the sale or the pitch is just as important because, to your point, like it could just be that you're not in the right headspace,
Yeah.
to hear it.
But
And it
you
might be
can't
something that
guess
you're really
that.
interested
If they don't tell you, how are you supposed to know?
in. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. But there can be an art to, I guess, like you said, like the questions that you ask and the space that you create to get to the bottom of kind of understanding, where they might be in that moment, and then, big picture where they might be, and how you can drive then your conversation. So this is a great conversation. I'm really loving this.
I'm just going to say one story, if you don't mind.
No.
Because it's only happened a couple of times because I try to respect the prospect or the client, when I'm talking about their renewal, for example. So when I do a renewal, I have a process that I go through because I give them all the information and and then we get to the bottom line. And I've had lots of times, let's just get to it. They go, well, back when I was doing paper with everything, they'd flip ahead, and not even let me talk about it. And I just remember this one time I just said, no, we're starting from the beginning. Okay. Put it back. And we did. And then it actually flows better for the salesperson, and the listening for the prospect is actually better if you go through your presentation without being too wordy or, sidetracked. It can be a lot smoother if they would just allow it to happen.
Yeah.
And I
do that a lot, but
you had the courage to ask up front. So if you're presenting at a table, which is how we used to do it, and the bottom line is on the last page, if you say nothing and there's 10 people, all 10 people start from the back. But if you say in the beginning, this unfolds in a logical way where the value becomes more evident, we suggest we wait till we get there before we look at the back page. Then only 1 or 2, and you don't slap them or call them out. The CFO is going to go to the last page no matter what you say, so you let it be. But look how you increased the odds by just asking for what you need and giving logic and legitimacy for it. Most people will play and be a good audience if you help them to know what, how, and why in the opening.
Right.
And rather than leave it to chance and then get annoyed because everybody started on page 10 and went backwards. But if you leave it to chance, that's 100% of the people will do that.
Yeah.
So good for you for asking for what you want. It's in their benefit, but they don't know it unless you ask.
Right. Yeah. Mostly it came out of frustration on my part, but that's okay.
But you asked and you got.
Yeah.
So
But you sat
that's
with
emotional
them, took a breath.
intelligence right
Yeah.
there, Kathy.
And then you pivoted.
I love that. And all of this ties into leadership as well. Setting clear expectations, letting people know, look, I get it. I've sat on the other side of the table and I know that, most of us, we just want to go get to the bottom line, but we're going to walk through this process because in doing so, you're going to better understand what we're doing, why we're doing it. And in the end, you're going to be able to have a better buy-in and clearer understanding. I mean, and you can talk through all the benefits of why we follow the process. So, and in doing that, you help them, you're acknowledging that how they feel and you're acknowledging that most likely this is what they're thinking, which makes them feel like valued. And in doing that, immediately begins to create that bond and that trust. That's really good. Thank you for sharing that. So then tell me about a time that you have seen the positive effects of a leader who possesses high emotional intelligence.
I'm going to say this. Hopefully it's not too noisy in the background, but this new person that I'm going to be working with, I'm pretty amazed by the startup and the people that she has on board as her team. And just doing a one-on-one with her, one of her big things is talking about respecting all the employees, I mean the team, respecting your knowledge, your input, and listening. You may not do it all, but listening, respecting your time, you know, in terms of how many hours you want to work or what you want to do or how you want to structure it or whatever. But it's all about about the culture. Her culture is super, super important to her. And it's a really positive, good culture. And I've noticed in just a few short weeks I've been kind of sitting in on the meetings is that there is a lot of meetings and there's a ton of communication, which is really nice. We've already talked about that, but I would say Kimberly, it is really amazing in that area.
Good. That's great to hear.
The other part of it, it makes me excited to do it, to help her grow. I want to, because, you know, because of the culture that she's building from the ground up, you know, you want to. That's anyway.
Yeah. I think that part of what got us to this place as leaders is there became the understanding and the teaching as a part of leadership development that said, staff your weaknesses. Be aware of who you are and who you aren't, and then surround yourself with people who are that. And then the whole next level of that as an emotionally intelligent leader is I'm not going to feel threatened by the people around me who have the skills that maybe I don't. Erin, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I was definitely thinking about a great leader that I had, but I just wanted to share a thought that popped in my head as well, that I think your point about communication and setting expectations is huge, in that like even an autocratic leader, if they set clear expectations and they communicate very well, you know, you could still end up with satisfied employees, you know, and people part of the team because they know what to expect. And it may work with those people's personalities or even the job and the team and the goals. But that being, you know, I think at a certain level, being a good communicator is wrapped into the emotional intelligence. But yeah, I was thinking of a manager that I had that understood, I think, like where I was at in my career and the energy I brought to the team and how I wanted to learn and grow my professional skills. And so in a lot of ways, she allowed me to, like, gave me the space to do that and would support me in those ways, and kind of let me run with things on my own because she knew that I had the energy to do that, and would do a good job and help me where I needed it. But she would give me kind of the space to spread my wings. So I thought that's really relevant to your point.
Yeah, that's really good. Tom, do you have anything to add?
I have a recent example. I'm so proud of a coaching client that I'm working with. And what she did was, so they have these performance reviews that have for these managers 360 feedback. And it's a big deal at this company. And she was traveling for a development opportunity, which was on learning candid conversation. And so she was with a lot of colleagues, and they decided to distribute these reports. And she wrote me and she said, I've made a decision. I'm not going to open it until we can unpack it together. And, you know, already people in the coffee breaks were buzzing about these reviews because they're a big deal, and they're going to be talking about them in individual conversations and group conversations that are scrubbed and say, we as a general need to work on that team. Anyway, it's a big deal, but she just made the decision. While on the airplane back to New York, there's nothing I can do with any of this stuff. And I'm going to focus on the two things I don't like, and rather than take it all in as a whole. But what I was proud of her, and it fits emotional intelligence, is she made the decision that she wanted to respond to it thoughtfully, and she wasn't likely to in an environment where she's traveling for training and socializing with colleagues. She didn't even want to think about it. But more important, it wouldn't have been constructive.
Yeah.
And I said to her, I said, oh, I'm just so proud of you for making that decision. And we unpacked it and got a strategy for dealing with the things that were, but she just realized this isn't helpful now, which doesn't mean it's not important, doesn't mean she doesn't have to deal with it. And I was inspired and realized how rarely I do something that intentionally. So I learned from her that, you know, sometimes now isn't the time.
That's really good. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, emotional doesn't mean reactive, or doesn't have to mean reactive, but it also doesn't mean that just because we're emotional, it's not valid. So
Yeah, but the intelligence here really came in with saying this does have impact, and now isn't the time to try and combine thinking and feeling, because it has a cognitive side and it has an emotional side. But the emotional side of I've got to open this now would lead to conclusions that weren't really the best choice. So it
Yeah.
was emotional intelligence extraordinaire.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. Well, hey, I want to be aware of your time. I know it's a little bit after 12:30. Next week, we're going to talk about actually some skills and how you can develop emotional intelligence as a leader. And I'm looking forward to our meeting again next week. If there's ever anything I can do to be of assistance for you, please feel free to reach out to me. And I hope you all have a great rest of your week.
A quick request, Aaron,
as well.
could you put your LinkedIn in the chat? Because there's a lot of
Yes.
Aaron Williams. I already reached out to Kathy.
I
I
saw
missed
that.
the social on the front end, so yeah, and I saw, oh, there's a lot of Aarons there. I'm like,
There's so many of us out there.
yeah, or an
Yes.
email address. Yeah, that's fine.
Happy
I
connecting.
enjoyed meeting both of you, and Liz, you're always a gem. I mean, Jill, you're always a gem.
Well,
Liz
thanks.
is not here, but I was talking
No.
about.
Jill the Gem. Likewise.
Thank you very
Good to
much.
see
It
you.
was nice
Thank
to
you.
meet you all.
Bye.
Bye.